Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May. The German war is therefore at an end. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
As Winston Churchill declares victory in Europe on the 8th of May 1945, he was well aware the battle was still ongoing, with war raging in Japan and also rationing still making its mark in Britain. I'm delighted to have with me this morning Carolyn Eakins from the 1940sexperiment.com. Carolyn is an education on wartime rationing, particularly when it comes to foodstuffs and, with a little imagination, what you could do with restricted supplies.
These little books may seem a bit complicated at first, but their purpose is quite simple. They mean that if, in the course of the war, we are short for a time of this or that article of food, rationing will give everyone, rich and poor alike, an equal share of all that's going.
Carolyn, welcome. We've just heard the rather clipped tones of Mr. W.S. Morrison, the food minister of the time, telling us how to deal with rationing. Why did the government feel it necessary for rationing in Britain?
First of all, we were importing 70% of our food into the UK. So strategically, the Germans thought, yes, let's bomb their food supply ships, which they did, and it impacted on the amount of food coming into Great Britain. Rationing was introduced on the 8th of January 1940. The reason I remember that date was I was born on the 8th of January, but not 1940. So they decided to introduce rationing to make sure that nutritionally all the British people had adequate nutrition and they remained healthy and morale remained high as well, because they wanted to ensure that whether you were rich or whether you were poor, you'd receive the same amount of food. So everybody became healthier. So that was the reason rationing was brought in. Obviously, because of the ships being bombed as well, I mean, our food supply was rather haphazard. So what they did was they began to import food that perhaps would keep for longer. So almost immediately, Britain's favourite food, such as bananas, you didn't see them for several years. And this was the reason why importing food such as bananas was difficult, because bananas just don't keep. So they really were sort of importing food such as cans and food that would stay for longer in your larder. And that's how they introduced the rationing system and the point system as well.
You just mentioned the point system. Explain precisely what that was.
OK, if we start about what the weekly ration for one adult was, just to give you an idea, it did fluctuate from week to week or month to month. So you had 4 ounces of bacon or ham, you had meat to the value of 1 shilling. If you look at it in today's money, that would be about half a pound of minced beef. You had 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of cheese. Now, 2 ounces of cheese is a matchbox size. It's absolutely tiny. 4 ounces of margarine, 4 ounces of cooking fat, a few pints of milk, 8 ounces of sugar. You had 1 pound of preserves every 2 months. That's 1 jar of jam every 2 months. You had 2 ounces of tea, 1 fresh egg a week, and about 12 ounces of sweets or candy, and that was once a month. That sounds a lot, but when you're not able to go out and buy what you want, it was quite a restrictive amount. This was the basic amount that everybody was allowed, and they had a ration book, and they ensured that they could get those items when they were available, and mostly they were, because people think rationing was literally a restrictive thing. It wasn't a restrictive thing. It was to ensure that everybody received a guaranteed amount of these products, which I've just mentioned, every week to keep health and nutrition up. In addition to that, people were given 16 points to spend every month as well. And this was generally used to buy convenience or imported goods. So you could go to your grocer and you could buy a tin of beans, or you could buy a tin of fish, or you could buy lentils, or you could buy dried fruit. They weren't always available, but you had these 16 points to spend on what you wanted, and it really just depended on what was available in the shop at the time.
At that time, the government encouraged people to grow their own fruit and veggies by promoting the Dig for Victory campaign.
Do you like standing in a queue for your vegetables, or do you think it's tiring and a waste of valuable time? Do you ever find your long wait has been useless, that supplies of what you want have run out before your turn comes? It's not the greengrocer's fault, it's up to you. Dig for victory. Thousands of people have discovered that a 10-rod plot will keep a family of 5 in vegetables 8 months of the year.
The Dig for Victory campaign, that was set up during World War II by the Minister of Agriculture, and it encouraged people to grow their own during times of harsh rationing. I mean, people really needed to grow vegetables to supplement their meagre rations. I mean, the rations were great. Everybody could survive on the rations, but people were hungry. They couldn't just go out and buy what they wanted. So people were encouraged to turn over their flower beds to grow vegetables. And I believe even outside the Tower of London itself, they turned over their flower beds to vegetables. Allotments sprung up. It really did help the morale of the British people. And in fact, with food and rationing, also the Dig for Victory campaign was a hugely successful time of propaganda, and very successful propaganda, and it raised morale and it made sure that people had plenty to eat.
Carolyn, how did the nutritional value of food then compare to now?
It's quite different when you look at it. I mean, anybody looking and seeing the amount of fat that was in the wartime diet might suddenly be forgiven for being absolutely horrified. I mean, you have 4 ounces of cooking fat, 4 ounces of margarine, 2 ounces of cheese, 2 ounces of butter. You've got people eating all the fat off their bacon and their ham. And if they're not eating it, they're rendering it down to fry things in. But when you think about it, today, although we try and be much healthier, we have so many convenience foods surrounding us. And we're also not as active. Then people were extremely active. The average person was burning about 3,000 calories a day. Now, with our lives where a lot of our jobs are sat behind desks, we're sat on our bottoms all day, I mean, we'd probably be lucky to burning 2,000 calories. So, of course, people did have to eat fat. It was good for you then because you were burning it off and you were very active. So today we have healthier options. We're surrounded by a plethora of wonderful foods, convenience foods, that not always the healthiest thing for you. And people have busy, busy lives. So reaching for something that's convenient may be full of fats, hidden salts, hidden sugars, obviously preservatives and colourings. Just because we live in a modern age here doesn't mean that we're automatically more healthier. We're not. Somebody said to me recently, it's all about eating less and moving more. And I do agree with that. And you can go back to the 1940s and see that people were moving more and they were eating less and they weren't eating convenience food.
Of course, in Britain, the rationing was quite severe compared to other countries, particularly America. That is true, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously America did have rationing and it was difficult, but I think in the UK it was particularly severe. And we really didn't have the option. We brought in spam from America. We began to use dried eggs, again, from America. And that was the option in your ration as well. You could have 1 fresh egg a week, or you could use dried egg and get more eggs in your dried egg. And for instance, I carry a jar of dried egg in my cupboard at home, and I do use it when I recreate authentic wartime recipes. So it's quite interesting to use that.
Carolyn, we're going to take a small break. I hope you'll be happy to stay with us for another segment.
Certainly will.
Welcome back. We have with us Carolyn Eakins from the 1940s experiment, talking about the realities of rationing in Britain during the Second World War. Carolyn, I would imagine you had to be pretty creative in the kitchen during the war.
Oh, you did. But you know what? Again, it was a huge propaganda campaign by the Ministry of Food during World War II. People used to go to the cinema on a Saturday morning. There was 200 food flash films played by the Ministry of Food, and it told you how to create food from your rations.
There's lots of potatoes about now, and at pre-war prices too. That's the boy. Have a second helping. Good health to you. Here's Spud in your eye.
They had people going into stores giving demonstrations. They produced hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of leaflets the Ministry of Food put out. So everybody knew how to cook from scratch, how to create recipes with limited food and extra ingredients. Even Lord Woolton, I think he was appointed Minister of Food by Neville Chamberlain in 1940. There was even a pie named after him, the Lord Woolton pie, and it was a vegetarian pie made with pastry, and the pastry could contain potato because obviously fat was rationed. There wasn't enough fat to go round, so sometimes you had to use different ingredients to make what you were used to making. I don't think the Lord Woolton pie was particularly popular. After all, it was just vegetables and pastry, but there was all sorts. People loved bananas, and suddenly they couldn't have bananas anymore. People made up crazy recipes like mock bananas made of parsnips. I mean, can you imagine that? Mushing parsnips up with a bit of banana essence and a bit of sugar, slapping it between your bread and having banana sandwiches that were actually made of parsnips. I mean, it was crazy. People made all sorts of weird recipes up.
What inspired you to look into the World War II diet?
It really was all about the food to begin with. I was quite interested in frugal, nutritious food. I was economically challenged at the time, so it was a real struggle to make ends meet. So I thought, well, this is a great idea. If I can look at rationing, because I was hugely interested in that period of time, the home front in the 1940s, in the British home front. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go and give this a go. I'm going to recreate recipes from the time. For one, I was really curious to see whether the recipes were as awful as everybody had said they were. So it was a thing for me to save money, to recreate recipes, taste them, see what they tasted like. But there was also another reason for it, is that I had extreme obesity at the time. At that time, I weighed about 340 pounds. And I'd looked into what they had been discussing about during the war, saying that people were very healthy during the war because they had created this rationing system where everybody received adequate nutrition. And they said people lost weight and people put on weight. So it depended where you were on the scale. So I thought, well, at the same time, I will try and lose weight doing this, see if it has any impact and any effect on my weight. And it did.
Of course, it wasn't just foodstuffs that were rationed, was it, Carolyn? We had a campaign, again by the government, that was called Make Do and Mend.
The Board of Trade has arranged with Harrods an exhibition showing the housewife how to turn old things into something quite different and good as new. Well, when it comes to clothes, Make Do and Mend needn't be at all unfashionable. Listen to what you can do.
Here is Mrs. Quilty on her way to the bathroom. She's wearing a patchwork dressing gown made of odd pieces of material. The lining was formerly a dust sheet. Her pajamas are made from pieces of material found in the attic, presumably great-grandmama's bedfellows.
It was so important to make do and mend during the war. People just couldn't go in and even afford to buy things, or things just weren't available in the shop. So if you broke a knife, you'd probably have to repair it. You may not be able to afford to go in to a hardware store and buy another one. So you really had to make things last. So again, a huge propaganda campaign. People would have to darn their socks. We're so used to just being able to go and buy a pair of socks when we want. I mean, clothing wasn't available. So people went in and they swapped their clothing. There was a very small clothing allowance. So people really did make do and mend during the war. It was a necessary thing to do for survival.
Carolyn, of course, we suffered shortages during the Second World War, but there's a little bit of a similarity then and now, isn't there?
There's definitely some comparison. Recently, we went into shops and a few items were rationed, and they had to put that in place because people were starting to panic buy. But more so the fact that people are suffering economically at the moment, and there's a very unknown future. So people are losing jobs. Some businesses will be folding and won't be reopening, or they will be laying people off. Some people are being furloughed, so they're perhaps only earning 80% of what they were earning before. So suddenly people are having to pull their belts in. You know, in many ways there is a comparison, and people are having to ration what they're buying. They're having to cut back. They're having to make do and mend, and they're having to look to other ways to make up that shortfall.
Yes, I heard on the ITN news the other day of a poor lady who did not have the money for the food that she was used to. And perhaps here is a time when your recipes or the recipes of the time could come into their own.
Do you know what? It breaks my heart. And this is probably one of the things why I've kept my website going since initially I brought it out in 2009 as part of the experiment. I'm very passionate about everybody should be entitled to nutrition. Everybody should be able to put food in their tummies. To me, it's one of those things that really gets me. So I love it. I love it when people use my blog as a free resource to go on and see how they can make nutritious meals with very little money. I love putting hints and tips out as to how to help people. But just looking at the rationing used during World War II, I mean, it's a great place to start. So a lot of my recipes, and nearly all my recipes, are based on World War II rationing, and it just happens to be very frugal as well. So a lot of people have come to me, and I've had a huge increase in traffic to my website as well, and I think it's all started from people suffering shortages and people worrying during this pandemic as well. I'm just glad I can be of some help, really.
I think we should push more people to your website, so perhaps you'd be good enough to give us the name of the site.
It's actually the 1940sexperiment.com, but if you put in rationbookrecipes.co.uk, you'll go to my webpage, which has about 190 wartime recipes on, that has full photographs, full method, full ingredients, and just welcome to use them. It's lovely to see schools using it. I get lots and lots of kids from schools as part of the national curriculum here in the UK using it. And it was great during VE Day as well. Lots of people coming on and recreating recipes for their at-home parties, as it were.
I guess during the war, people always liked a bit of a freebie, and you're offering a bit of a freebie as well, aren't you, I understand?
Yes, well, I'm working on it at the moment, but I hope to have it live by the end of May. Actually, this is brilliant. I've had people, a huge community from all over the world, actually. A lot of people from America have submitted recipes that they're using during the pandemic. So when people are on lockdown, when people are trying not to go outside and trying to stay indoors as much as possible, they're using what ingredients they have in their larders. So people have been sending me recipes from all over the world: New Zealand, Australia, obviously America, Mexico. I've had so many people send these amazing recipes through, and I'm putting them into a book, and it's going to be a free digital book, an ebook online. It's called pandemicpantry.co.uk. So if you put that in to your web browser, you will arrive on the page which will contain the book when I have completed it, which I'm working on at the moment, and I hope to have ready end of May.
Carolyn Eakins, thank you so much for your time this Saturday morning here on Senior Safe Money Strategy. Some wonderful information that I'm sure people will find useful, and I do hope, in the words of the Force's sweetheart, Dame Vera Lynn, we'll meet again some sunny day.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.